Okay, hello everybody. This is part two of just my general thoughts on Attack on Titan. Where we ended up last time was we were essentially talking about the themes of the show. I have about three and a half, one, two, three and a half more sections to go. I'm moving into craft now. I want to talk about the writing. I want to talk about the foreshadowing in general. I want to talk about the music a little bit, the animation, the action, the twist, the world building, kind of a lot of it. Let's start with the writing on the show. As I've said, I think that the long term planning of the show is, I mean, ultimately the best I've ever seen. I'm really racking my brains because I just don't think there's anything comparable. There's also a part of me that feels like I don't think there should ever be anything like this again. I think that if it existed in our lifetime, we shouldn't get another show like this. This kind of thing is so rarely done because of how difficult it is. I think I'm right in saying that the creator of the whole show, of the whole manga, like basically is exhausted from that process. And I do think the problem is that it takes a very singular vision. When most shows get into a writer's room, there's so many people working on it that it's not that you like have to sort of bend the knee to each other's ideas. It's that really exciting ideas come up. And I'm sure that had he sat in a room with lots of other people, it could have improved the show, but it also could have taken it in different directions with lots of other people. I don't know what his process was. I don't know what the process was, but the long-term planning of it is utterly phenomenal. Sometimes I've wondered if the dialogue style of hitting you over the head with things over and over again is part of that, that there's so much that they've worked on from the beginning that there's a need to like keep reminding the audience. I think there's some really interesting consistency with certain characters. Obviously, Eren has a huge shift, but it's a very specific shift in season 4. But the consistency of approach, there's that great thing about a sitcom. I learned it from the woman whose name I'm forgetting, who made Abbott Elementary. Why am I forgetting? Let me name her. Abbott Elementary. Quinta Brunson. She talks about how she learnt the lesson about writing sitcoms, that when you're writing the characters of a show, every single show, so imagine there's $5 in the pit on the floor, $5 bill. Every character of that show should pick it up differently and do something different with it. And then she lists off all the characters from her show. And I think that that's not necessarily that's also about the diversity of like character types in sitcoms. But with this, it's more that they're so consistently written, you can kind of almost predict their actions. So there are things that aren't surprises, but they're still great. Like when Levi ends up killing Zeke. I mean, what a phenomenal moment that is in no way a surprise, right? Like it's a surprise because it's just crazy, but it's not a surprise that he did it. And I can't really pick out a ton of moments from different characters, again, except for Eren, where I go, well, that doesn't make sense for that character. There are some really, Levi in particular, Erwin in particular, I think Mikasa in particular. Armin, yeah, there's a little bit where I think the love story was always there, but like we just didn't see Annie for so long. I just think there was a lot of consistency in the delivery of these characters. Now, obviously, I'm not completely in love with the dialogue. I'm not completely in love with this sort of over, tell don't show, but also really hit you over the head with the emotion of these people. I do understand it, but it is a thing I wish didn't have to happen. I understand it from the perspective of they're honoring something, but I'm a big believer of adaptation sort of changing form because it's a new medium. I don't think a thing has to like do something just because it made sense for the other medium. So a lot of people tell me that the sort of style of dialogue and the style of like facial expressions and the overexposure of like information is sort of connected to the manga. I get that and I understand that and I respect the choice to do it, but I also go, I wish it wasn't the case. I don't. It's hard to tell if I think the show needs it. It's hard to tell if I think the show would have been fine without it. There are certain emotional payoffs that I'm not sure would have hit as hard without that sort of tone. So in many ways, it's useful. It's there, but yeah, it's a shift. Um, as I've already said, the foreshadowing. It's simply put. Again, we're moving. It's saying the same thing as what I just said about the long term planning. The foreshadowing is the best I've ever seen it. It's the best I've ever seen. And again, I'm not sure we deserve that more than once in our lifetime. I'm not sure we could handle getting media like that over and over again. I think it is. I think it's important that it's singular. Um, yeah, I just think it's. I think it's so much. I think it's so impressive. I am so interested to know if any of this was what. I'm so interested to know how much of this was planned and how much of this was truly sketched out, or if there was a sense that some of it, because obviously not all of it, but some of it was worked out along the way. Because most mystery shows are. I don't think the writers of Severance truly know everything about where the show's going. We know they didn't know with Lost. I don't think even, I mean, we saw what happened with Game of Thrones. They kind of screwed it a little bit by kind of taking their own decisions. I mean, how many mystery shows? I'm watching Silo right now. I feel pretty confident they know where they're going because there's source material, even though they're making changes. But a lot of those shows do tend to kind of like figure it out. A lot of things that I often people like cite as like great foreshadowing, I often think is just an accident. That happened a lot with Breaking Bad, where people would show things at the beginning and then at the end. I'm like, I think they got lucky. You have to remember with Breaking Bad, they wanted to kill Jesse, so they clearly were figuring that show out along the way. Um, I am excited to rewatch to look for clues. Yeah, I've kind of already said that. I think it's interesting that I've never seen a show so clearly reward you for paying attention. How often do I think people kind of think they can get, I mean, even with a show like Severance, even with a show like Lost, there are people who watch those things and don't really focus. And I think that Attack on Titan is really saying, hey, like, if you watch this closely, you'll get something out of it. And I admire that. Now this is where probably one of my big critiques, and this is a taste thing. I really don't like a lot of the music through that show. Now you have to remember, I come from, for people who don't know, I come from a very musical family. My sister is, a lot of you will know her. Her name's Mahalia. She's a very famous singer. I grew up around music. I have my own taste, and it very rarely like came up. There's a couple scenes. I think I particularly remember Levi when he has to like fight his own people and then go after Zeke. I think that's a great like a bit of score. But mostly, I'm really sorry, guys, because I know people love it. I don't find the music that interesting, particularly again because it's too overt. I actually really love the silent moments. I actually really love like little moments of silence. I will say this, I do think the score in season 4, and I don't know if it's the back half of season 4, but it's very good. There's a very like creepy tone that I think feels like it's Aaron's theme, but it's not. It sort of plays out throughout the show. That's the only time I was like, oh, I like this. But again, it's way more restrained. It's way more sparse. I actually think when the show was doing the sound of them like, zipping around on the ODM, riding horses, throwing things at one another was so much. I didn't need a lot of sound. Even in the final battle, I just didn't need a lot. I'm just gonna quickly reply to this text. Yeah, I know that that's a thing that people really enjoy. I know that I've been told to go back and watch the opening credits, but it just wasn't to my taste, guys. I'm sorry. Um, let's talk about animation, because I know that there's a sense that like season 4 isn't as beloved, which I understand is a massive change, but I do think there is like way more detail, no? And there's way more scale in that final season, and it feels like some of the most ambitious animation work. Am I wrong about that? I'd love to know. Do people think this is a case of like you were used to something and then it changed drastically? Because when I said I liked the animation style, in my most recent post about finishing it, I did see a lot of people like, you liked it, that's crazy. um I actually found the animation of season 4 the one. I mean, well, let me tread lightly here. I found it the least difficult to adapt to, but that may be because I've adapted to seasons 1 through 3, and also seasons 1 through 3 do like just keep improving as the show gets on. But I am a fan of the animation of season 4, and I also love the movie. um, yeah. I think the action is also very interesting in connection with the animation. There's something that I found really fascinating about like the development of the ODM gear and the development of like Irwin's strategies and the development of certain things that they do. It kind of like they were having to work through limitation, and that kind of matched. I think I remember saying this in like season 1, maybe season 2. No, yeah, it was season 1. It was when we learned about Irwin's system for. I mean, that I thought that was genius. I thought that was so incredible. The method to which they communicate like across huge swaths of land, but also it helps to really help you understand the size and scale of the land. But I always thought that mimicked the attention to detail with the animation, because there are moments where they kind of scale back the animation. I remember seeing a moment of the armored titan running at someone, and it was like, oh, it's just a bit of a blob, and then it takes a couple steps forward, and it suddenly got a little bit more design, and by the time it gets up close, it's like, oh, there's all the detail. And the show was always very clever at working through limitation, and in many ways it matched the sort of creativity of, I guess, the action, the choices that the creator made to develop those materials and develop those techniques and develop what they had available to them. It's like he really forced himself into a corner of going, right, this is a somewhat primitive culture compared to ours. How do I create a way of fighting these, beasts that are titans? The action itself as well, I find pretty thrilling in the sense that it seems to always be serving. I mean, it's always serving the story, but I also think it's serving the character in different moments. I don't ever feel like I watch the big action scenes. Of course, there are little moments when people just dash along and chop a titan down. But I feel like every big action set piece never just feels like a set piece. It really feels, obviously it's always connected to the story. It's always moving us forwards. But it also feels like deeply connected to a character. So I go all the way back to those first scenes when the first scouts were wiped out and Eren was going through what he was going through and trying not to turn to fight Annie, but then eventually turning. I think about the final scenes with Hanja, when Hanja goes. I think about all them chasing after Connie to stop Connie from killing Falco and turning his mother back to normal. And I just feel like sometimes. And I kind of remember this with Dragon Ball when I was younger. Sometimes I'd be like, all right, this is great fun. Who is this serving? Who is this fight scene serving? It feels like it's just there. And sometimes they would go on far too long, but that's by the by with Dragon Ball. But I do think like I don't recall like any set pieces or any action with tension that not only serves the story, but really also serves a character or something about, even like the battle at the beginning of season 4 in Liberia. It feels like there's so many different people and so many different moments who are having real change happen, whether it's Gabby, whether it's Falco, whether it's Eren, whether it's Reiner, whether it's the death of Sasha. Like, it really impacts their personal stories, which I think is really brilliant. Now, I was going to do a thing about, like, my favourite moments, but I'm kind of not, and I'll explain afterwards, but I do want to talk about the twists. I do think that it's very interesting that the show really builds to the basement. And actually, when I get to the basement and realize that there is this sort of other place where they're more developed, it's actually, no, it's not underwhelming, but it just doesn't compare to what I think are twists of structure. So Reiner and Bertold, their reveal as who they are, being off on the side, the opening of season 4 being this thing where we're in Mali, this weird thing about future memories and the get on your feet dad, it all feels like the best twists are the ones that recontextualize everything that I've seen in the show. And whilst, getting to the basement and realizing what we know about Mali, it doesn't completely recontextualize the show at that point, for me, not anyway. It gives you information about Grisha, and it gives you information about this world that we don't know, but which we then, I think, get information to, like, like, I can't remember, is it the next episode or a few episodes later? But I guess my point is that it doesn't change what I understand about a character truly. It doesn't even really change Grisha. It changes his origin when we get to the basement story. Obviously, we learn more when we see him when he was younger, but it doesn't make me go, oh my god. All of those other sort of structural twists are drastic recontextualizing moments about not only the characters, but like where I'm supposed to align, how I'm supposed to feel. And I find that fascinating. And I honestly cannot think of a show that does that as well as this. I cannot think of a show that so regularly made me look back at somebody else's memories or see a reveal or whatever it is and suddenly go, oh, I don't know these people in the way that I thought I did. The basement doesn't do that. The basement goes, oh, I don't know this world as I did. But there's so many with Reiner. There's so many with Zeke. There's so many. I mean, the whole sequence when in the future memories. There's so many with Gabby. There's so many with all these people, and it's incredible. Even something as simple as like revealing that Reiner and Bertolt are the Colossal, and then I think it's the next episode we go back and we find out that they had already kind of worked that out. And I just think the show was so impeccable at recontextualizing things over and over again without ever feeling like oh my god, again, you know. The closest I ever got to it was like after we get those episodes of Eren in the memories of his father, turning his father against, making his father do what he wanted, kicking Zeke out of that memory, then being back in the paths, and then all of a sudden on the next one, you know, Eren has to like rip his hands out because Zeke has suddenly got the upper hand a little bit. That was the closest where I was going, oh, we're recontextualizing again, but we didn't really. Eren got what he wanted. And so I just find that all very fascinating. And I think that also really connects, sorry, I'm just reading my notes here, that also really connects to the world building at large. The show feels really, I know this sounds a bit crazy to say, but the show feels really small at the beginning. It really feels like, you know those videos of like someone zooming in on some image they've made on the iPad and the image just getting denser and denser and, you know, you just keep getting, or I think they're zooming out and it just gets denser and denser and then eventually resets. The show kind of felt like that to me where I didn't really fully understand the size of the island before I knew it was an island. And it starts as a world that feels very small to me. And it just feels like it's this thing. It's like pulling an elastic band and being like, wait, what? There's all of what? It just keeps going and going and going, and it never snaps back. If anything, you know, when you then finally open up, it's like all of a sudden the middle of the elastic band goes, actually, there's another one here, and it goes even further. This world feels so small, and then just it just what's the right word? It just inflates. And like, I found that so fascinating. I found I could never truly understand the size of the world. I thought it was smaller, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I think the first time I really noticed it was when the refugees of the people of the wall, is it Wall Rose, have to like go to another area. I can't remember which wall it is now. I was like, oh, they can take in all those people. I thought it was like, oh, this is a big place. I'm trying to think to myself, does it ever feel like expansion for the sake of itself? But it doesn't. It doesn't. It is just a giant goddamn island. Now, I had a section here about favourite moments in the show, and I have decided that I feel too influenced by the first watch, and I require another one. Because the truth is, when I think about it, it's all the obvious ones. I think the Reiner Bertolt reveal, as I say, the on your feet dad moment, Owen's speech, the obvious major emotional peaks. I feel like I want to rewatch so that I truly go, well, what did I connect to? I think I've told you before that the Bystander episode was probably my favourite. The Kenny episode was one of my favourites. I have a feeling I'm really going to love some of the OVAs. I have a feeling that watching those, I'm really going to get a sense of like, well, this is great. It's going to be interesting watching the show again, knowing the destination, and watching if I can discover the sort of quieter moments that are building towards it. Like I've said, I want to know more about whether or not I see in Eren the more foreshadowing of where this was always going to go. I'm looking forward to kind of finding my own, you know, favorite sort of my own favorite moments without just revisiting ones that we all sort of know are brilliant. So it's obvious that the ones that you all know that get talked about a lot, I think they're all brilliant. I think they're all brilliant. I just don't know if I'm interested in like revisiting them. But so that was my half section. Speaking of like knowing where it all ends up, I think we should talk about whether or not they stick the landing and some of the choices around the ending. I think that I want to talk not only about the final episode, but also about season 4 as a whole. I think when it comes to season 4, I think everything leading up to maybe the final hour is unimpeachable. I think there are things that could be improved. I think that there are things that could have been better. But most of that is in the context of knowing where it all ends up. Because the truth is, the feeling the show gave me throughout season 4, that whatever my gripes are about the ending, you can't take it away from me. You can't take the feeling away. You can't take the angst. You can't take the emotion. You can't take me, stressing out. You can't take me the hairs on the back of my neck. You cannot take any of it away. And so when it comes to that final season, I personally think it's an A+ final season. Even if and we haven't got to it yet. Truth be told, I haven't really fully fleshed it out, so I don't even know how I feel about the ending, the final sort of episode. Even if I had like major issues, I still think I would sit here and say, I don't care. Season 4 is phenomenal. I don't know if that's the case for a lot of other shows. I think most shows tend to either stick the landing or a lot of us are like, my questions obviously begin with Eren. That's where I start to kind of pick it apart in terms of the finale. But again, those questions do not diminish the journey that came before. Season 4 to me remains an utterly extraordinary achievement of TV. My biggest question about Eren is wanting to do a rewatch and wanting to understand if I feel like what happened is earned. Was this characterization always there? I understand that Historia is a bit of a turning point. I wish I'd have seen more of what he saw. I wish I'd have understood it. And so I have to really accept that, like, I need to go back and watch essentially seasons 1 to 3 of Eren and really understand if the person who's in that final conversation with Armin, if that person was always there. And I feel like there are things I can attach to. I'm very particularly getting a memory of when the first scout group is like slaughtered by Annie, the female Titan. And Eren is very impetuous and wants to turn, like he's like getting ready to bite, and he's like foaming at the mouth. And it is true that, and he was a child, like literally, like a child. But there is so much about that I think is maybe a sign of like, okay, this is someone who is always thinking about and for themselves, even when they think they're not. Even with what he does to save Mikasa, which is a good thing, but his father told him to stay home. And so there are things where I go, okay, I know there's a very impetuous, impulsive person, but and listen, they keep getting called brats by Levi the whole time, but there also is a real depression to him, a real nihilism, a real sense of like, nobody else, why didn't he let someone smarter than him eat him so he could have let them figure it out? And then the idiocy of him as well. That's the stuff where I have to ask myself, do I believe he was always this person, or do I believe he was always capable of doing the things he was going to do? I am very unsure of that. I'm not sure I feel I'm not sure I feel like I can answer that question clearly. I want to check my notes because I feel like I also wanted to talk about those final choices, because I know people really want me to. I thought it was in my notes, but of course, one of the things that people keep asking me is, I thought I wrote notes about it, but I didn't. Maybe I just spoke them out. The thing, of course, that people seem to be asking me a lot, I'll probably stumble on these notes as I go through, was whether or not it's justified. No. No. it's there are non-combatants, there are children, we see them. I can't ever get on board with the idea. I'm very confused that people could think it's justified. I think maybe a harder question to ask is the choice, do you understand why Aaron made that choice? Not is it understandable, because it's not to me, but more like, do I understand the choice? And for that, it's all connected to whether or not I believe he was this mess of a person. I do know he says his head is all tortured apart because of what happened with him, and partly with Ymir and the paths and all of that. I would like to see more of that. I don't really get a sense that I have seen any of that. The closest was maybe towards the back end of season 3, before he touches Historia's hand, when he's in the jail cell and he's kind of freaking out because he's getting the memories of his father. I feel like I'm a bit lost on if I think that this was always in him. I do agree with the slave to freedom stuff. I do agree with that he had that about him, but there's quite a leap from the Eren that we know and the choices that he's making and 80% of the world's population. It's, even seeing him crying at that young boy who's like one of the first people to die, it's like, so he knows the weight of what he's doing. And those are the questions where I go, I don't know if I can find my way to understanding his choice. It's going to require rewatches, and so it may just be that I don't think they did enough with the characterization across the show. And this, this may be this may be a bit of a result of the two strengths of the show, which is real strong character consistency and also really strong foreshadowing. So you've got all this foreshadowing, but it doesn't match with the character consistency, because how can you foreshadow that Eren's character would change so much when you're focused on the consistency of who they all are? Yeah, difficult questions. But just to the baseline one of, is it justified? No. For it to be justified, I have to truly believe that there was no other option. And I think I said in the previous review, I've sort of begun to reject this because I don't think the writing is ever good enough. This is the same as the Avengers Infinity War thing. I'm supposed to just believe you looked at everything and you know this was the only option. Frankly, I don't anymore. Frankly, I think people need to write things better. It feels like a throwaway line. There was a line he says to Armin in the conversation, like, I've tried everything. Have you? I don't think you have. I think Mikasa, her final choices in the show are brilliant. Oh my gosh, I've just got a very long message. Okay. Oh great. Okay, cool. I'll get back to that person in a minute. Just got a little moolah. I think I was so I never said this, but I never got spoiled on anything. But one time I did do a live, and I never did a live again whilst I was watching the show. And someone wrote in there, Mikasa dies to save Eren, by the way, and I was fucking furious. And I just kept it to myself. And so, of course, I spent the whole show going, well, I know she's going to die eventually, and then she just didn't. So it was kind of a nice thing that person did to me, which was very sweet. And I think that ultimately her choice is super important in the framing of the themes of the show. She is truly freed in the deepest, most truest sense. And I'm confused as to how she was able to hurt him, and maybe I've missed something, but a part of me doesn't really want to know the sort of technical detail of like how she was able to get past her programming or whatever it was, if any of that was even true. Yeah, I think it's really important that is a choice that her character gets to make. I really like Armin and Zeke's conversation, and I really like Armin and Eren's conversation. I like it, even though I struggle with the switching characterization. But I like it. That's an important thing to say. I have a little bit of disconnect with Ymir. I have a little bit of disconnect with the sense that she loved King Fritz. I still feel like I don't fully understand her motivations throughout. The mysticism of it and her being trapped in the paths is an area that I'm least certain about. I can kind of make my peace with it. The problem is that they almost gave us far too many answers, and so I can unpick it in a way that probably isn't healthy. And actually, I do just want to be like, I don't really know what was going on up there, but whatever. Like, I kind of was happy to accept it. I think that one of my favorite parts of the ending is the sort of epilogue with the title credits. It makes me feel cold. It makes me feel rough inside. But watching them rebuild, and then the destruction that follows, and then the boy and the dog finding the tree is genuinely chilling. The cycle continuing, but it's more over this sense that, like, I just watched a show that we have all connected with and none of it mattered. And of course, actually, that's not what's being said. The ending is really, it's such a hopeless show, but the hope lives in the fact that it's really committing to this idea that life is about watching time pass by. Armin and Zeke's conversation, I think, is a perfect example of that. Even the jokey ending afterwards is a perfect example of that. Committing to this idea that, war was inevitable and their homeland would be destroyed is a really important part of that. But it made me feel ill. It was cold and rough, and I didn't like it. And it makes me admire, though, what the ending is attempting, even though I felt those things. My final sort of rating on the show is that my immediate instinct right now is to say this is an 8.5 out of 10. And the reason I say that is because it's between 8 and 9. I don't know if I only have one 10 as a TV show in my entire life, and it's Mad Men. Even shows that I love more, like The Leftovers, like, I don't love Lost more than Mad Men, like The Leftovers, I just don't ever think I could give a 10. Mad Men is the only show where I go, I can't find a flaw. I can't find a problem wrong. I can't find a thing wrong with it. I've watched that show over and over again. I cannot find a thing wrong with it. My immediate instinct is to settle around a sort of like 8.5 out of 10, but the truth is it's most likely a 9 out of 10 with ease. It may even, I suspect rewatchers are going to amplify that a lot. This is also, I have a habit of trying to be very restrained in my voting when I do things like that, because I don't know how I'll feel. I think I talked about this maybe in the last one. I don't know when I talked about this. But, like, I remember watching Everything Everywhere All at Once coming out and be like, that's a 10 out of 10. It's the greatest movie I've ever seen. And then, like, years later, I'm like, yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great. I really love it. But it's not the greatest movie I've ever seen. So I like to now temper my responses to things and just go, let's see where I'm at. So for this to be an 8.5, for me is high. I have to say that. It is one of the strongest all-time television experiences I've ever had. It's going to need years before I could tell you where it sort of ranks for me, if it makes like a top 10. I want to know what kind of characters stay with me. I want to know what parts of the story stay with me. But ultimately, the things I will say here, right now, is that the foreshadowing, the long-term planning, the twists and reveals, the reinvention make this one of the all-time great overall journeys of a TV show I've ever had. And in many ways, the things I love about Lost is that it's better in the planning and the structure and the delivery and the punch of things. Lost still does things that I love, I think the closest I can compare this show to, as I've said before, is Dark, the TV show on Netflix. But Attack on Titan is ultimately operating on a level that I have to consider elite, on a level that I think is probably never going to be achieved again. And that is it. Slightly shorter notes today, only half an hour, but I'm excited to start a new show. I want to start one tonight and record it, but I also feel like I still need a bit of time. So I think maybe the best thing is tomorrow. That being said, I'm super thankful. I'm super thankful for everybody who pushed me to watch this, has like come on the journey, has embraced my like sort of, I wasn't so immediate with everything. You guys have been in love with this art form for a while, and I'm glad to be getting to learn it also while loving it. And yeah, it's given me some of my favorite TV moments of all time. And that's it for now. that's it. I think I should pack it up there. I feel like I've been talking about this show. Oh, crazy! I saw Seth last night. We went to see a screening. It's the 25th anniversary of Amaros Perros. So for everyone who doesn't know, Seth is who got me to watch this show in the first place. I was watching his reactions, and it's so funny because I said this about Seth the first time we met, that he was not really a big TV person, is what he told me. And so I've been seeing him watch more and more TV. And so there's a part of me that thought, no, I've got it wrong. He is a big TV guy. And actually, last time when we were talking, it was kind of reiterated to me because I was talking about all these TV shows, and he hasn't watched them. So it really was his love of the show that made me be like, I've got to watch this. I've got to check it out. So he's not in this group. But we had a lovely conversation about the show, and we talked about moments, and we went through it, and he reminded me of things. We actually talked about it for quite some time. We met up before the screening for like an hour. So I've also got to like have that conversation in person with someone, which is really great, as well as my friend, of course, who was helping me through it. But that felt slightly different. He felt like he was more like, the whole time he was trying to bite his tongue. But yeah, this has been incredible, and I will see you all very soon.